I'm Emily Branch, Conversation Health's Head of Community, and I'm here with Dr. Duray Hussain, VP of Medical Strategy and Conversational User Experience. She is a physician by background and has led the data strategy at Conversation Health for the last 4 years. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of a medical-specific taxonomy. Hi, Duray. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me.
So my first question is, what is a medical taxonomy?
The medical taxonomy is simply put an information architecture. We borrowed the word taxonomy, which really is a way to organize and classify various disciplines of science, whether that is organisms, systems, so on and so forth. What we're organizing at Conversation Health, the medical taxonomy, is all of the types of questions a user, that being an HCP, might ask about a product. So imagine you're having a dinner party and someone comes to your house with a pie dish, right? And this pie is cut into different slices. But the interesting thing is that every slice is a different flavor. So you have your pecan, and then you have your apple and your pumpkin and cherry, so on and so forth. The taxonomy is almost like that pie, but every slice represents a different flavor of question an HCP might ask. So that pecan might be administration, the apple might be efficacy, the pumpkin might be safety profile, so on and so forth. So what we really have is clean cut lines of slices that represent different topics a user might ask.
And how do you use a medical taxonomy?
There's two ways, actually. So the first being with those clean slices that have been provided to really deep dive into each slice and ensure that we are populating that slice with every type of question a user might ask about that topic. So I might ask, what is the administration of this product? You might say, tell me the administration of this product, right? So the first one being that administration slice is filled with all of the different ways you can ask that question. The second is, now that I have all those questions, that's great, but I need to respond to them. So that slice is also going to be the host area for where the conversation is written, where the response is written. So this slice of pie is almost like the crust is all the ways you can ask a question, and the filling is really the conversation, the response the user will get by the agent.
And why is it important?
Well, in healthcare, we don't really have any room for error. So having to answer a question, it can only be done if you really understand what's being asked, right? And what the taxonomy is doing for us, it is providing a really clean way to distinguish different types of questions. If we are removing any confusion that the agent might have, you are increasing your chances to almost perfection that the right response will be given based on what the user is asking. So if you have a high accuracy agent, and with that high accuracy agent, you are ensuring that we are following the rules of healthcare and not accidentally or by error giving the wrong response.
What is a policy engine and how is it incorporated into Virtual Rep?
Policy engine is the rules that are really enforced on the behavior the agent should have. So all of the examples we've discussed so far, we can safely assume that they are on-label questions a user might ask. What is the administration, indication, efficacy, so on and so forth. So there is a very simple expected behavior, just give me the right response. However, what if a user asks or wants to report an adverse event or a product complaint? So the behavior has to be a little bit different. What if the user wants to escalate to a live agent, right? If it becomes a bit more transactional, obviously the behavior of the agent has to be a little bit different than the simple Q&A that we just discussed.
And how does Virtual Rep understand medically nuanced language?
Well, the taxonomy is basically trained by HCPs for HCPs. When we discussed one of the uses of a taxonomy to ensure that it covers all the different ways someone could ask a question, that someone is an HCP, and no one understands an HCP better than another HCP. So you now have an intelligent team of people who are working with engineers, and they are ensuring that we are covering every type of question an HCP would ask in their language. We are guilty of speaking in a different lexicon altogether, as medical practice really enforces us to. So if you asked or somebody asked, tell me about the mechanism of action of this product. It's a really lengthy question. It's very clear. But obviously, when you're in practice, you've gotten into the habit of shorthanding. So mechanism of action, to me in my head, and hopefully in the taxonomies as well, is the same as MOA. MOA can be recognized by the taxonomy because there's a team of HCPs that made sure it can. If you took it even a step further, if the product at hand was an antimicrobial, that query about what is the MOA is the same as an HCP asking, how is this product stopping cell growth, right? Or inhibiting cell synthesis, things of that nature. So because we are the end users, we've ensured that all medically nuanced language is covered in the robust taxonomy that we have.
Can virtual rep understand off-label queries? And if yes, how so?
It most certainly can. Virtual rep is most certainly capable of understanding off-label queries. I want to be very clear, though. Understanding an off-label query does not automatically mean it will respond with the off-label content. So it understands it in the same way it can understand any type of question, which is that the HCPs who have collectively worked to train this taxonomy, the coverage is so robust. There are, Emily, hundreds of millions of data points of different types of questions and ways of asking questions. So the topic coverage is so well done that off-label queries are one of the many types of queries the taxonomy is able to understand, and so the virtual rep is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to be very clear, as I mentioned. Actually, you know what, Emily? This is exactly where the policy engine comes in. So the policy engine, as I mentioned, it is really enforcing the rules of the behavior you want the virtual agent to have. So if a user does go in and they ask an off-label query, and we know more often than not that's what HCPs are interested in, the taxonomy not only just recognizes the question, but it recognizes the fact that it's an off-label question. On top of that, its behavior is now going to be different than the way it reacted to an on-label question. So this is a perfect example of policy engine, right? To ensure that we have set rules and guardrails for the agent to know when and how to respond to different types of questions from the HCP.
And what's next for the use of medical-specific taxonomies?
So two come to mind. I'm very excited for them. The first is heat maps. So let's go back to that pie dish. Let's say you're having Thanksgiving dinner at your house and this pie dish arrives and you find that most of your guests are eating the pecan and they're eating the pumpkin, right? In the same way, imagine in the taxonomy, we can illustrate heat maps as to what are the 2, 3, or whatever number of slices that are wanted by our guests the most. So what are questions the users are asking the most? It's almost like an FAQ, but there is an illustration on the taxonomy for it to indicate, the hotter and redder that portion of the taxonomy is getting, the more important it is to ensure that there is a response ready for it. And we're prepared to respond to it by the agent. In the same way, actually, the second very exciting innovation is going to more or less use these heat maps in that. So imagine that guest of yours who kept eating the pecan pie, now they want to follow it up with pumpkin pie, right? It's almost like their dessert journey. So in the same way, having the insight of knowing the patterns we see with the users and what journeys they want to go on is really insightful because we get to predict what we need to be prepared to answer. So, for example, let's say HCPs whose point of entry begins at a question such as, what is the indication of this product? Once they get their response, if we find more common than not, the second follow-up question is, what is the efficacy? we kind of see the journey that they're going on, right? Maybe if someone starts by asking about safety profile, their journey might differ because they would want a follow-up question about a specific adverse event. So having this insight, almost connecting the heat maps, like a connecting the dots, is really allowing us to set the virtual agent up for success and our users up for success to ensure that they're having a really seamless interaction and experience with the virtual rep.
Thank you, Dr. Duray. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.